everyone, Kareem right here, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Lynn Berling-Manuel, who is the Managing Director at the Women's Independent Soccer League, or short form WISL. Lynn, thank you for taking the time for joining us today. How's it going?
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. It's going great, Kareem. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, before we get into WISL, I'd love for you to take us back in time and just share how you got involved in the beautiful game.
Okay, that's kind of a scary far back journey. It's kind of that way back thing, but
I
I've
like to
been
go way back.
okay. All righty. I come from a soccer family, and not players or coaches, but fans, and go back more years than I care to admit to. My dad was a passionate soccer fan and brought all of his six children into the game in one capacity or another. And I was a journalist, actually a city side journalist, not a soccer journalist. Vowed I would never actually be a sports writer, but through a whole series of circumstances, ended up as my first really big soccer commitment was being the executive editor of Soccer America, which at that time was a print magazine. Today it's an entirely electronic company, but I was there for many years, including 20 years as their CEO and publisher. I left Soccer America, it's almost 18 years ago now, and became the chief marketing officer for an organization called AYSO, which was a very large, it continues to be a very large youth organization in the US. At that time, it had about 600,000 players. People were stunned that I was going from Soccer America, which was entirely focused on the game and fans and players and international and at a very high level, to children's soccer. And there's a story behind that, of course, but it was a very eye-opening experience on the game and in far more ways than I ever would have imagined. And I was there for almost 8 years. And during that time, I had been on the board of directors as an outside director for what was then the National Soccer Coaches Association. And then I was hired as their CEO. And so I served as the CEO of what started as the NSCAA. We went through a rebrand during my tenure there and became United Soccer Coaches. And I left as CEO 2 years ago and launched a consulting practice. And one of my first clients was WISL. And I started with a really interesting project for them, which was all about developing culture for pro soccer and for women's soccer specifically. And it went very well, and I really enjoyed the process and the people. And my role has expanded quite considerably. And I have helped guide them through their sanctioning process as a professional Division II women's league in the U.S. And that's that's the short form of a lot of years, but that kind of brings me current.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely decades that you've been in
Decades.
the soccer business side of it. And, um, you mentioned the United Soccer Coaches event, which I had the
Mhm.
opportunity to go to this year for the first time, which there was 15,000 plus people
Yeah,
there at that event. And I was actually in podcast row, so we were hosting our podcast there for the first time. So it was really cool to
that's great.
see as the CEO of United Soccer Coaches back in that time, um, you know, what what role did you play in regards to as CEO? What did you have to take on in that position? And then from there, what are the things that you've learned from there that has helped you start your practice with the consulting?
Sure. My role at United Soccer Coaches was a very interesting one. I had been involved with the association for a long time. That convention, I think it's their 85th convention coming up this year. And I'm not going to say I'd been there for 85 of them. I won't tell you that, but I'd been there for a lot of them. And they'd actually been a kind of an important event every year in my career because for a very long time, although it's a coaches convention in name, and certainly there are thousands of coaches there at every level, it's actually become kind of the industry meeting for soccer in America. And so it's coaches, it's players, it's businesses, it's hundreds of companies displaying, it's podcast row. It really brings together sort of what is unique about the American game, certainly, but I think it actually is sort of a bridge to the entire game around the world in many ways. And I had actually sat on their board of directors for almost 10 years prior to my CEO role. I was an at-large board member. The association has a number of outside or at-large board members that bring specific expertise to the board, legal, financial, and in my case, it was business marketing. Coaches are wise when they realize, as are we all, that we don't know everything, and it's great to bring others in to make a more well-rounded group. But when I joined United Soccer Coaches, and I'll just continue to call it United Soccer Coaches, it took me such a long time to bridge from calling it the NSCAA. Um, but the organization, and in many ways the game, was going through some very large transitions. As in its iteration for all these years, United Soccer Coaches had been one of the finest, and continues to be one of the finest coaching education organizations, frankly, in the world. But education was broadening on the coaching side. There were many organizations. US Soccer had made some, finally, after a very long time, made some very dramatic inroads. And it was really, the organization was taking on a larger role as an advocate for coaches, which is really it enthralled me, and what really I think made the CEO role so interesting to me. So during my tenure there, it was really building on that notion of advocacy for coaches as a pivotal and critical part of the game. Advocacy from a career perspective, advocacy from a community perspective and it was really what we built out during my time there, including they have an advocacy council which has created, I think, almost 13 specific groups, including a very large Black coaches council, a very large Latino, very large and traditional women's group that's in there, but a wide variety. There's a very active Asian Pacific Islander group. And I if I try and list everybody, I'll leave some out. So I'll just start with that highlight there. And frankly, the rebrand was a very large, very dramatic thing to go through. I felt very strongly about it. We've done a year of research that as an organization evolves, it also needs to think about how it projects itself to the world. The membership of the association includes a fairly large international component. It includes coaches at every level of the game, from professional to from the highest to the lowest levels, and I don't say those with a judgment, just the different levels of the game. So for me, it was really taking an organization that had been in business for 80 years at that point and trying to think about it in a new and broader way. And we had a great deal of success with that. I led the organization through COVID, which that convention that you went to, we did it virtually that first year, or the year of COVID, but enormously successfully. And so it was a wonderful experience for me, and I hope I was able to bring my soccer experience, my business experience, and my strategic experience to the association. And my departure was a bittersweet one. It's one I had long planned, both for sort of personal and professional reasons. I really wanted to spread my wings a little bit more and take the strategic perspective I have about the game and try and apply it to other areas. And that's what I've done. So it's been a real fun journey for me.
Absolutely. United Soccer Coaches is such a great name. Uniting the people. Soccer. With saying that too, I went 2023, so this year, which was great. Mm-hmm. Hopefully I get to go to the next one for next year. Hopefully
Anaheim, weather should be good.
Yeah. And you also mentioned spreading your wings before you left. Mm-hmm. What are 3 key big takeaways that you took away from that working experience with United Soccer Coaches to then venture off?
Oh, that's interesting. Let's see. My 3 key experiences. I would say surround yourself with really, really good people. I had a very, very smart staff, and I'm a very big believer in pushing authority and responsibility down. I'm never I know from vast experience, I am never the smartest person in the room. And the moment I think I am, I'm in trouble. So we had a wonderful group of a wonderful team. And from my perspective, they were empowered to really grow our organization be honest and forthright about the status of the game, what the market looked like, what coaches needed. And it was sort of out of that collaboration and cooperation, which is something I believe very strongly in, that we were able to really grow the association even further. And it's hard to make changes or go into the future when you have an organization that's 80 years old. I was the first and so far the only woman CEO. That was it's interesting. It was I certainly got lots of support. I also found, as often the case, some of the challenges of being in that role. So I would say that's one. It is pushing a responsibility and authority down. It is creating a great team and trying to lead them the best you can. If I have, let's see, second, it is to do your homework. The rebrand is a really good example of that. For some, there was a perception that somehow I woke up one morning and said, we should rebrand. And I assure you that was not the case. It was a year of both internal and external research. We brought in an outside firm to actually do surveys. We talked to, I was going to say hundreds of people, but dozens and dozens of people. We did a membership survey. It wasn't that we asked, do you want to change the name? Because the name was less the issue than a brand is much bigger than a name or a logo. A brand is the promise you make to your customer. And we wanted to expand the promise that we made to soccer coaches, which was we are an advocacy organization for them. So it is that notion of doing your homework is something I always believe in. Anytime I've tried to cut that corner somewhere, and we all have, I've been sorry. And I think the really positive result of the rebrand was simply the due diligence of literally a year of really hard work to determine if A, it was the right thing to do. And once we decided, yes, indeed, it was the right thing to do, well, how do you do it? How do you, if not change the promise, expand the promise that you're making to coaches, both in the US and around the world, of what the association could deliver to them. And third, it probably goes back a little bit to what I said in the beginning, to just a reminder to myself sometimes, I'm not the smartest person, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, is that, I have, like all of us who've been in a role for a long time, I have a lot of confidence in my capacity to do things, but you learn quickly that if you think you're always right about anything, you're probably wrong more often than you're willing to acknowledge. And surrounding yourself with good, smart people, listening. I don't always listen quite as well as I wish I did. I'm learning and growing all the time to do that better. And I'd say that's the three.
Sure. Those are three great points. Going back to the first one that you mentioned, have you been acknowledged or rewarded as like the first woman as a CEO at the United Soccer Coaches?
Well, that's an interesting question. Not in any massive way. I mean, for me, it's a great point of pride, but the more important thing to me is not so much to be the first, but not to be the last.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
and my hope is that, what we have seen in the women's game, what we have seen in women in our sport, is really an important addition. I mean, one of the challenges for me, and it was an interesting one, and it's still an interesting one. I'm a woman in soccer, but I don't come out of the women's game.
Right.
It kind of didn't. I don't want to say it didn't exist at all, but I came out of soccer, and being a woman was simply part of that. And I'd always had to sort of balance that process. And as in the last decade or so, with the rise of the women's game, there were times that I really sort of felt not part of. I didn't come up through the same process of lots of our key leadership in of women in soccer. So I'm not sure I'm speaking to it exactly directly, but nobody I didn't get a giant bonus or get an award. Let's put it that way. But it was still, it's a point of pride for me. There's no question about it. I was proud to be there. I felt strongly, and to this day, nobody hired me because I was a woman. They hired me because they thought I could do what needed to be done.
Right. And that's amazing, though. I think, this is something that should be highlighted, and, you know, to inspire other women that want to, be in that
Yeah.
position one day. So I think United Soccer coaches need to get on that.
Well, that's kind of you. That's kind of you. It's I think all organizations,
Yeah,
they were wonderful as I departed. There's no question about it. I mean, but a CEO is their job is to make sure everybody else does well,
right.
and that's really the job. And whether you're a woman or a man, whatever the case may be, I was followed by one of my staff who was promoted to be the new CEO, an extraordinary man who is doing an extraordinary job. So, an organization goes on, top leadership comes and goes, the organization goes on.
So this is a perfect time for us to transition to your consulting practice.
Sure.
Um, how and why did you start it, and what's the name of it?
And I'm going to tell you the name, and I don't want any chuckles because it was a name that I had picked years ago, and it is Multiverse Strategic. And the only reason I say no chuckles is when I selected that name, which is something I had always wanted to do. It was almost 20 years ago, and the term multiverse had no meaning to anybody but me. And I read a book that I had absolutely loved called Out of the Corner of His Eye that talked about the notion of the multiverse. And more recently, it has become kind of a hot thing, but I like to think I picked it first. But the reason for selecting that name, Multiverse Strategic, is the multiverse, aside from the fact that Marvel has made a fortune out of it, is actually a theory both of physics and philosophy that says every time you make a choice or a decision, you create a new future. And that was this particular book, when I read that notion, I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to help people make decisions that sort of change their future. And I frankly took it to heart a long time ago, and it's sort of been the course of my career in a lot of ways. Strategy to me is fascinating. It's how do you choose where the direction is, and what is that going to play out like? So, in many ways, my time at United Soccer Coaches, which I enjoyed immensely, and the convention is fabulous. There's fabulous people, and it's based in Kansas City, which I had come to as a lifelong Californian. It was the first time I'd ever lived in the Midwest, so that was really interesting. But after being there for almost 7 years, I was itching to spread my wings a little bit more. I loved the rebrand. It was for me an enormously important strategic project to take on. We had done some others, but strategy and helping others develop smart strategies that really took them in important and new directions is what I'd always wanted to do. So I was in a position in my life for a variety of reasons that the timing was right. And that's how it began.
Can you name a few of the companies that you currently work with and have worked with in the past?
Currently, again, WISL is a client that I took on. I'm actually doing some work for United Soccer Coaches. A project that I am doing for them, or it's a consulting project, is around coaching compensation. And on a much larger scale, we've done a survey of coaching compensation with over 5,000 coaches giving us information, and it's being developed both into a big information resource, but I'll be doing a session at the convention actually on coaching compensation. And it's been much more interesting than I'd ever imagined in a lot of ways. I am working for a company called Satori, and Satori is a technology company, but it's more than a technology company. It's developing a very cool tool that is actually a parent survey for clubs around the country and around the world, actually. So those are my three current projects. WISL has actually started small, but has taken on a much larger amount of time. And so that since I've left United Soccer Coaches, those are the three that I'm working with right now.
Got it. Now diving into Whistle,
Sure.
uh, what are the key objectives and goals of the new mission-driven professional D2 Women's Soccer League? set to kick off in spring 2024. That's under U.S. soccer sanctioning.
Well, what brought me to WISL. I'm gonna say something that sounds kind of funny because it's not where most people come from in soccer, but I have never in my entire career particularly wanted to work in professional soccer. People are very surprised at that and say, "Oh, doesn't everybody come into soccer to want to work in pro soccer?" Well, having come out of the media, having seen the youth side, seeing, all of these various aspects of our game, pro soccer has a dark underbelly that I never really wanted to pursue. And when I say that, it's a very hard job for everybody who works at a team, for everybody who works at a league. My admiration for them is infinite. It's a very hard job, very satisfying for many, but I had always thought, wow, that's a tough one. So when the WISL folks came to me, what they were really asking me to do was something really quite different, which was to help to develop the cultural foundation for a new league. And what was so appealing to me with that was, again, from a strategic perspective, how do you think about a professional league in a new way? And what I did as my first project was work with their leadership to really develop the cultural foundation of the league. And it was represented, and I'm a very big belief. Everyone talks about culture, and I'm absolutely a believer that culture is just a wish until you make it concrete. And I have learned that in many aspects of my career. So what I proposed to them was to help make culture concrete. And what we did was develop 7 pillars that really focused on various aspects of the game, how people treat each other. In some ways, it's things as not simple, but the notion of safety first, that there is zero tolerance for bad behavior at any level. And the league is absolutely committed to ensuring in a very practical way that that is always executed 100%. It includes things like looking at everything the league and teams do through the lens of sustainability. It includes things like ensuring that whether you are a player, a coach, a front office person, that at the point you make a decision to have children, through whatever means necessary, that takes place, that the league supports you, and that there is appropriate parental leave, and things that sometimes people don't think about as being culture, but collectively they speak to the fact that people are the center of any professional league. And the culture has to be right for the people who are involved. Certainly the women, because we see this as a very women-driven organization, but at the same time for everyone who's involved in that league. So that was the beginning of it. But in many ways, what is exciting to me about WISL is, and I have been in the game a long time and seen how the game sort of links together. And there is literally an open lane in the women's game from my perspective. And it is the lane between college and higher aspirations, Division One, international. You may or may not be aware of it, but there are 1,000 Division One, Two, and Three women's NCAA programs in the U.S., plus 200 NAIA women's college programs. That's close to 40,000 female athletes who are coming through the collegiate pipeline just in the U.S., who at the end of who have played soccer likely all their lives, have spent hundreds, thousands of dollars and thousands of hours. And at the end of college, there are a handful of jobs available. The notion for WISL, from our perspective, is really to create a bridge for those women who hope to have higher aspirations, an opportunity for them to be in a professional environment and evolve to that. And again, not just on the field, on the touchline, referees, front office, but it could just be the coolest first job out of college. And you get that soccer pro experience and you go on to the rest of your life. Or it could be the start of a career. And from my perspective, that lane is wide open. And it's important to see women evolve at every level of our game and come up through all facets of the game. So for me, WISL was both about its culture and about its place in the sort of entire soccer hierarchy, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm super happy to see it all coming together, and it kind of seems like perfect timing per se. A lot of women's soccer is blowing up all around the world, so it's growing and it's booming. With saying that, I wanted to share a memory that just popped up in my mind. I remember the first time I ever seen you was on LinkedIn, watching a few interviews of you speaking on behalf of WISL, I think. If I remember
Mhm.
correctly, and I was like, I want to interview you, Lynn, and you know, I was going along my journey of podcasting, and it's so cool to see it come full circle. Now we're here doing the interview, so super excited. Again, I know I keep saying that, but that's all I can
That's
think.
very flattering. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Um, with saying that, I had the opportunity to interview Peter Welt, founder of NISA,
Mm, sure.
and we know starting a league is not an easy task in the U.S.
It
Um,
is not.
so along your journey with creating Whistle, would you could you share one of the biggest challenges that you've come across so far?
I think it's probably selling the concept of lower division soccer is that there is a dream often, and when I selling the concept of it, the notion of the highest level of the game sort of captures the imagination, and yet it is the underpinnings of lower division that really brings the entire soccer hierarchy together. And it took a while for people to really understand what we were trying to accomplish with Whistle. And Division Two has not existed. Professional Division Two Women's League is a brand new concept in the U.S. And it's also hard. Oh, it's a challenge. I won't say it's hard, but it's a challenge to sell the folks on the notion of this is something special and something important. And then of course, I think there's just the traditional stuff of any startup business, which is it's finding the folks who both have the funding and the vision and the understanding of what it can be. Whistle is also similar to NISA, is also an independent club model. And that's not the norm in American sports. American sports, almost without exception, are franchise based. So an owner pays a very large upfront franchise fee to a league, and the league owns much of the rights around that club. The rest of the world is our independent clubs. Liverpool is an independent club. It pays a membership fee to its league, but it controls all of its intellectual property. It controls everything. So what we have done is really created that independent club model. It allows, frankly, for no territorial rights, so that again, I forget the number, but it's an incredible number of clubs that are in London alone, frankly, and each of them do very very well. And the notion of that is that geography doesn't need to eliminate crosstown rivals. Ideally, it should facilitate crosstown rivals. And so that's part of Whistle's premise from a business perspective is each club is an independent club. It belongs to the league as a member, and the clubs themselves really help drive the direction of the league. Now, saying that, we also have bumpers around that direction, and frankly, that's where the cultural values became so important, is they provide the bumpers. Owners and prospective owners had to commit to the culture that was being developed. And we certainly found folks who didn't fit that as well. And I think it always makes sense to know up front that the group you're putting together look at the world in a similar fashion. So it's been a journey. It's been a fascinating journey, and I've absolutely loved it.
Understood. And that point that you mentioned in regards to Europe teams being so close to each other versus in the U.S. with territory
Mhm.
rights limiting that, and the U.S. market being one of the biggest markets in the world is so interesting. And would you say that? I mean, you guys are doing it in regards to not limiting your clubs in regards to territories. So you guys believe in that. Do
Yep.
you think if other leagues were to open up and start doing promotion relegation, that it would help the game grow, or it would destroy the structures of the leagues that they have existing.
Well, I think realistically, and I know a lot of American soccer fans will hate to hear this, but I think the franchise model is pro rel does not fit well in a franchise model. If you have spent millions to buy a franchise at whatever the top tier division is, the likelihood of you being willing as an owner or investor to say, "Oh yeah, I'm willing to go down," even though I've spent millions to be at this level, that's just not going to happen. I appreciate the non-owner's perspective of, well, it would be better for the game. But if you're an investor, that is not very realistic. The open and independent model, however, does tend to facilitate the pro rel. And I think that we will see more of that over time. We certainly have a wide variety of league structures in this country. So far, all franchise based, but in terms of hierarchies, how they connect, you have USL, who's quite different than MLS and its family of leagues and levels, and I think there's room. The U.S. is a very big country. And I think it's something, I mean, the world is a very big place. And the reality is, I think people kind of forget that I think there's room for a lot of different models to be successful.
Understood. That's a great point. And I agree with you as well. Can you provide more details about WISL, about the role as a second division in women's professional soccer in the United States in regards to that there's already an existing first tier league? How do you guys plan to approach investors? You mentioned a little bit about this investing in regards to Division Two soccer. Why would investors want to come to your league?
Good point. I think it's a different model. I think it's a very community based, almost hyper local model in many ways. And I think that's very attractive to a lot of kinds of owners. We are finding, quite honestly, that's very attractive to a lot of kinds of owners. I think there is a place for every level of the game. I do. I think there is a place for amateur. I think there is a place for second division. There's obviously a place for first division. What we have done is said part of our ethos, and again, something I feel very strongly about, is being cooperative and collaborative. It doesn't tend to be the soccer way, has been my experience, but it's one I believe in a lot. We've had warm conversations with NWSL. They're deeply involved with what they are doing and are not worrying about what anybody else is doing right now. But our point to them has really been, look, we hope to develop players who have the ability to play at a first division level or an international level. And we want them to have that opportunity to move on if it's appropriate. We see the potential of lots of collaboration over time. Now, at this stage, they are very focused on what they are doing and how they are doing it. And each of the leagues, and we've certainly watched this with MLS, is that it has evolved over time. And that is the nature of all businesses that survive and prosper. And it will be the nature of each of the soccer leagues in this country as well. But our entire perspective is we want to see success. And I think success breeds success. We would rather see everyone be successful. I have good friends in each of the leagues, and it's been fun to. There is a line at which we do not cross. I will be honest about that. But in general, it's been fun to talk about what are the opportunities that could be there. We all watch kids who have spent their entire lives, girls and boys, playing soccer, being in elite clubs, participating in tournaments. This is a life for thousands, if not millions, of kids in this country. And they do, I mean, thousands of them are moving into the college ranks, and then it ends. And we don't
Yep.
want it to end for them. They're going to be fans and there's going to be a lifelong attachment to the game. That's incredible. And we want that to be there. But to also have that dream of being able to play at that professional level, whatever the division may be, that's just a thrilling thing to be able to make available to them.
Absolutely. And this is going to be a loaded one. With the 2026 World Cup, coming up with U.S., Canada, and Mexico hosting is just going to energize the countries and bring more soccer people in the U.S. Well, not soccer people, maybe people that are not really
Sure.
into soccer. Um, with saying that, the numbers are going to skyrocket, but I actually want to just track back a little bit
Sure.
and ask you a question in regards of why do you think women's soccer has blown up in the last few years? Why is it now? Um, and where do you see this leading into the future? With If you could just ask this to the
Sure.
Mark, the last person I interviewed, he's like, "Let me pull out my magic ball." So I'm asking you to pull out your magic.
Well, it's been a long time coming. I mean, keeping in mind that NWSL is the third iteration of a professional league in this country. And I'm never a believer of assuming success is a done deal. It's been heartwarming for me to see NWSL evolve as well as it has, and certainly there has been bumps along the way. It has, but I think there is a moment in time, both for the U.S. and the world, because girls have been playing. 50% of the participation numbers in this country have been female forever. So girls have always played. Now the opportunity for them to do something more has been quite limited, and largely limited to the national teams program, which again, it's a very, I mean, it may be the best of the best, but it's a very small number who are ever anywhere in the world who are ever going to get that opportunity to play. But I think there's also, it is an interesting time, in the sense that at the very moment in time when parts of the world right now are struggling for women to really, find their voice, and to be accepted as equals. I think that the game and the evolution of the women's game is a testament to how powerful that is and can be. Um, and frankly, the soccer is good. I mean, I think it's one of the things that was really important, that the soccer needs to be good as soccer. One of the things that I like so much about the evolution of the women's game is, for a long time, if it was anything that rubbed me wrong, it was perceived as kind of a gimmick. It wasn't real sports. Isn't that nice girls play? And isn't that nice they win, Olympic gold? And isn't that nice? But, are they real? Is this really serious soccer? Well, we all know today, yes, this is serious soccer. Here in Kansas City, and it's a good place to look. And we had Sporting Kansas City, a very, very successful MLS team for a very long time. Kansas City is a mid-sized market. It's a pretty cool city. I mean, I was reluctant to come here in the first place, and probably shouldn't admit that, but I'm a West Coast person. This was the middle of the country. It was terrifying. It's one of those, just surprising jewels of a city in a lot of ways. And on the soccer side, Sporting Kansas City ruled. Well, we now have the KC Current here in NWSL. They've built an $18 million training facility. They're building an $80 million stadium. Currently, they are sharing Children's Mercy Park with Sporting, and both are having unbelievable crowds. I think that the audience has become more sophisticated and appreciates the women's game, but I think that the women's game has paid a lot of dues to get here. This is not an overnight success. This is years of a lot of people doing a lot of hard work, and I think some really, really good things along the way. Certainly, the success of the women's national team is a huge plus, no question about it. But it's a lot more than that. I think it's the drive from below of millions of girls who have played and been successful and know the game very, very well, not just as players, but as fans, and an appreciation by their male counterparts that the game is exciting and fun to watch. and a good level of the game. And now we're just seeing it globally as well.
Absolutely. I've watched a few games overseas first, which is
Hmm.
the thing. Teams like the Barcelona women's team, Chelsea
Yep.
women's team, which was great to watch. It's soccer, it's the same sport, but it looks like a different game being played on the field, and it's great quality as well. Um, and I'm excited to hopefully see a U.S. women's game soon. With saying that, what can investors expect in regards to investing into WISL? Are they expecting? Are you guys expecting investors to build brand new stadiums? What's the seat capacity going to be like? And um, do they also have the opportunity to launch men's and women? I mean, women's and men's, or is it are they only limited to just investing into WISL?
Oh, lots of questions.
Yeah, that was a loaded question.
It's okay. We are certainly not requiring building stadiums. I appreciate those who are, that is generally speaking a Division One opportunity. The professional league standards of U.S. soccer have a minimum size for Division Two women's soccer stadium size of 2,000 seating capacity. That's not acceptable in the sense that you can't make money with a 2,000 seat capacity. So what investors do need to come to the table, and it is a requirement to get a team, is you have to have a stadium that probably seats at least 5,000 and potentially has the ability to expand its capacity over time. So that's one of the requirements of potential owners, is to have identified an appropriate facility that will also lend itself to the experience that you want to deliver to your fans, because selling sports of any kind is selling an experience. And so that's an important component of it. Needs to be good field. There needs to be. I mean, again, U.S. soccer has very strict professional league standards for every division of the game, and Division Two is no different. And they visit before you are approved. They visit every facility. They measure every field. They check every surface. They are no fooling around with this. And I appreciate that. A lot of people grumble, saying, oh, they're trying to make our business harder. A lot of professional soccer teams have folded in this country at every level, at every level. And US soccer, I give them all the credit that they want everyone to be successful. And a lot of it is making sure that you have the right pieces in place from the front end. So the notion of being able to invest in both a men's and a women's team, quite frankly, the minimum number of teams to launch a Division Two league is 6, and our launch group all have men's teams already, and are seeing as part of their business strategy and their business model to utilize some of the infrastructure of the men's team, but with a very clear understanding that they are launching a separate and distinct and different product. We think it's a good business move. We do not expect that to be where everybody comes out. And actually, we have about 5 teams that are largely already committed to 25. Most of those not, with a men's team behind them. So I think it's going to be a mix. I think it's going to be a mix. I think you're going to see that at every level. I'm actually surprised there are not more MLS teams already who have NWSL franchises. You will see more and more of that, is my guess. It's good business. It allows you to leverage your expertise. That's one of the pluses for us, frankly, of having a relationship with NISA, which is actually third division men's league. But it's nice to not reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. It's nice to learn from other people's successes and their challenges. And we've tried to be smart enough to do both.
Understood. What would you say are what's one main thing you guys have took away from NISA that you said from the relationship with NISA that you guys said, okay, um, we've got that, we've done that mistake here. We're not going to apply that over here at WISL, um, or or if
Sure.
not that, what are great things that you guys have taken away from that league and said, hey, we're going to apply these same things to this league.
I think the NISA teams that have been most successful, and some have been so successful, they've made the decision to jump to Division Two from 3 to 2 and
Right.
have changed leagues. Something that, I mean, I think that's a bitter pill for some, but not for me. That I think is not. I think that's a natural direction for many. So we've been able to watch what a lower division men's team how they can be successful in a market. And it is, in essence, being hyper local. It is very much, I mean, we've got a lot of TV models right now. We have Wrexham as a model of a little town with a quote unquote little team, but is passionately beloved by its fans. NISA has been able, the teams that have been successful have done exactly that. The teams that have had more challenges often, I think, have sort of magical thinking. We'll put it on the field and people will come. And the reality is, it is very hard work. It is very hard work to launch a professional sport of any kind, of absolutely any kind. And it requires that you know your market well, you know your fan base well, that you are part of the community. That's the NISA teams that have done well. Frankly, the professional soccer and other sports teams that do well almost always do it the same way. They go into their community first. They reflect their community. Green Bay Packers are a marvel because everybody at Green Bay own that team. And I think we'll see more and more of that as well. So NISA certainly has been, we've had learning experience of very practical things. How do you ensure that owners coming in are clear-eyed, that they understand the financial commitments and what it will take, and that it takes time? There are no instant successes in our game. When you see instant successes, as a rule, that's a lot of money being spent very, very fast, which may or may not continue at that rate, or there is certainly lightning in a bottle sometimes. But I have found in my experience, lightning in a bottle is a bad business model. We all wish for it. We all wish for it, and we all can learn from it, but you can never expect it to be so.
Understood. So there is that recipe in place for success as long as teams are doing it the right way. But you're saying that when club owners are magically thinking or trying to reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
then that's where they're going wrong.
It's been my experience, and that's true at every level of the game. It's true at every level of the game. There are a lot of failed professional soccer teams in this country, far more male failed teams than female failed teams. But the reality is that's also, I think, just the evolution and learning of a sport. It is. And we all get to have learned from the many teams that have come before us and the many people who have done good work. You mentioned Peter Wiltz. He's somebody who has been involved with many teams over a long period of time, some very successful, some not. But he's a fountain of knowledge and expertise. There's no one almost like him in this country.
Yeah. My second last question before we dive into the fun questions is, what's the investor criteria looking like if you're able to share that?
Um, there is a net worth. There's a variety of standards that are established by U.S. Soccer, which includes a net worth of your primary. There has to be a primary investor who owns at least 35% of the club, although there can be multiple owners and other kinds of funding. The net worth of that individual is quite high. Those are some of the financial parameters. We're very clear on what the budget requirements are at sort of a low, medium, and high level, which can depend on market and other things. I can't share the exact details because, again, that's kind of what we're out there selling, and you'd have to have a non-disclosure agreement and all those things. But what we're trying to do is really learn from what all of the successful teams in this country have already gone through, and to put it in that way. We don't, we're very interested. There's a great variety of people. It doesn't require being a female owner, but we definitely love having female ownership and female investors, and hope to have more and more of those over time as well.
Absolutely. Um, I don't know. Should I make it a 2026 World Cup question or a U.S. Soccer Federation question?
Oh, either one. They're both
Either
fun.
one. I
Yeah,
already
no.
passed the 26. We'll go because you guys have created a league, so we'll go U.S. Soccer Federation. What would you say was the hardest challenge that you guys have faced with going through all the rules, laws, and regulations to being compliant as a league with U.S. Soccer?
I honestly was impressed. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'll tell you that right now. but I was actually impressed by the thoughtfulness that had gone into it. I know there's, you could feel the fingerprints of a lot of folks who had been there, done that before, or seen it done before. And it included really, including the profile of the investors, including the details of the stadium and facility, the size of the market. I think that's a really critical thing. Each division of soccer and each gender has different requirements under the U.S. Soccer Professional Standards guidelines, and I think they are reasonable. Um, we all try and perhaps make sure that they're understanding how and why we're doing what we're doing. If there's anything I would say is that the model that WISL and NISA have, that independent model, that's a little bit of a challenge because it's not what people are familiar with in this country, including U.S. Soccer. Their experience is with franchises. And as an example, NISA has certainly had some teams have a bumpy experience, but my observation, because I haven't done it personally, but my observation is every league from MLS up, down, and sideways, everybody's had teams come and go. That's part of the learning process. And frankly, I think owners at times get into something more than they realize, even though you tell them. We have not had that experience yet. We hope that our owners are well informed and fully understanding what they're getting into. I'm very impressed with the ownership group that we have, but U.S. Soccer needs to always be double checking that. They've got a lot on their plate, quite frankly. I think even though many of us feel U.S. Soccer is enormous, and they've gone through lots of changes these last few years. They've gone through presidential changes, a new secretary general. They've gone through a lot of changes, so they've been spread thin at times, and that's been a challenge. But they've been very supportive, and we appreciate that.
For sure. Well, to end off, I have some fun questions, some lighthearted
Sure.
fun questions. Um, who who's your favorite women's soccer team at the moment, if you have one, to watch?
I'm going to go hometown right now and say the Kansas City Current because they're amazing. It's a husband and wife who drove it. Chris and Angie Long. We have Patrick Mahomes and his wife who are investors, and watching my hometown, building a stadium, a first class stadium. This is a first class sports town, and they got a first class women's soccer team. That's thrilling. So I'm going to say Kansas City Current. So everybody's going to be mad at me because I picked that one, but it is my town now.
Yeah. Do you have another sport that you like to watch other than soccer?
Well, we had a very long NFL weekend, and I am not. I am a general sports fan. I would say I'm married to a man who is one of the biggest sports fans ever, and our balancing act is I mostly did soccer. But again, it was a fun NFL weekend. I will say that we were watching Kansas City last night, and that was thrilling.
Nice. Do you have a few favorite music artists that you listen to?
Oh, that just makes me old. And so I'm reluctant to say this. I find that for many of us, we get time locked the year we graduated from high school. Now, maybe that's not true for folks anymore, but I'm reluctant to go down that path because it always makes me look older than I wish I was. So I appreciate the question, but I am going to decline to answer on the grounds that it will date me.
Okay. What is your favorite food to eat?
Oh, that's interesting. I would say Chinese. And I
Well,
will say it's my only beef. I come from a part of the world, California, which has got the greatest Chinese food in the world, except for China and except for New York City. And Kansas City, they got the best barbecue ever, but Chinese, I'm going home for that.
yeah. Like, what kind of Chinese food though? Like pad Thai or sushi or
Oh, I tend to be a Szechuan. I like it spicy.
spicy?
Yeah,
Uh,
spicy and
so what were you gonna say?
spicy and hot.
Yeah, for sure. Um, last one. Um, I don't know any women's like off the top of my head, like the top two women players in the world, but I have to ask you this one: Messi or Ronaldo?
Ooh. Oh, Messi.
Messi,
He's so fun. He's so fun. Yeah, I say Messi.
sure. Lynn, before we go, I would like to thank you for taking the time for joining me on the One Soccer Nation podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Kareem. This has been fun. I congratulate you on having the bravery to launch a podcast. It's a I never thought I'd actually see radio come back, but in its own way, it has, and it's fantastic. So thank you for all that you're doing.